you should be slow to speak, quick to listen. And I'll tell you what, mind what you say, because you never know who's listening. I had a situation the other night that kind of made me really think about a lot of things, and especially in this business, why you should be very careful about who you talk to and how you deal with people in the office and whatnot. And it started off with just me having a night off, and was there in Walcott, went over to the Checkered Flag, said I was going to have some chicken wings and a Diet Coke and a little bit of bourbon. 10 hours from bottom of throttle. Let's keep it real here, guys. Anyhow, so I'm sitting there listening to one guy on this side and one guy on this side, and they're talking back and forth, and they're talking about military stuff. Well, they don't know me from Adam, despite the fact, for some weird reason, I was wearing my Army shirt that day. And this kid starts talking about being an authority on X, Y, and Z. Well, basically the M1 Abrams tank mechanic, or M1 Abrams tank, and all the sorts of military equipment and this and that. And I could tell that he had knowledge, but I could also tell that he had knowledge as a dependent, not as a soldier. And he got talking about these things, and what made me laugh, and I didn't even engage in this conversation for the most part, was the fact that he said over there they had M1s and Abrams. And I knew he was talking out of his butt because he was sitting right next to an M1 Abrams tank mechanic. I was very intimate with those tanks, knew all about them. I tore them apart. I put them back together. The Army spent millions of dollars teaching me how to troubleshoot, diagnose, and repair M1 Abrams tank mechanics, and then sent me to a Patriot missile unit to service an M88 that I had no working knowledge of because, well, be all you can be. So, it was the military. And it got me thinking, you know, why you should always be very careful about what you say around people, because rats are everywhere. Got a story about that. Not too long back, I decided to go across the parking lot there at the Loves in Sioux Falls and have myself some chicken wings and a Diet Coke. No bourbon. Just having lunch, and somebody ratted me out. Said I was in the bar drinking and I was back in the truck. Like, you SOB, I'm getting lunch. Next thing you know, suddenly I'm being called in for a random with a breathalyzer. And that taught me a valuable lesson, that there are rats everywhere. And there are always these guys in these companies that will sit there and try to build points, and they'll try to brown nose, and their whole life they've never been smart enough to know that this doesn't work. They just ended up being used like the tools that they are. They just won't leave people alone because for some reason they have an over-exaggerated sense of importance. But I digress. You know, I have no idea who it was. I have a hard time. Normally I wouldn't have a problem with a random because I'm always clean. But the breathalyzer threw me off. And, of course, I blew 0.00. And I've made it a rule that if I'm going to be there for the night or the weekend, I don't ever even imbibe in one little drink until the office has gone home. Sometimes rules like this are more about self-preservation than doing what's right. Of course, you should always try to do what's right. Let's not split hairs here. But you really need to watch yourself, because things of this nature go a lot further. 90% of the people I know that got themselves in trouble at work was because they couldn't keep their mouth shut. They couldn't keep their opinions to themselves. And while there is a time and place for everything, work is generally not the place. You know, I remember this. It's funny that the mafia has a code of conduct which is similar to, it's almost biblical to a point, when the mafia leaders flat out tell their proteges, be the last one to speak, be the last one to cast out, be the last one to judge. The walls have ears. You don't know who's going to run off in which direction and rat you out. And that may save your life. Well, biblically speaking, it's true. And in the mafia, it's definitely true. And there was one guy that was talking about that, a former mob captain. He was being interviewed. And he said that, and he said it did save his life. So, why am I on this trend? Well, it was not just that deal in the restaurant. You know, you just never know. You don't know everybody at your company unless you've got 10 people. And even with the 10 people, you may only know 8 of them. There's probably 400 to 500 people that work for this company I'm at. I don't know them all. I couldn't tell you. And, oh, excuse me. I've been up since midnight. I was going to sleep in, but then I woke up. And my body said, you're up. So I went to work. But you just don't know. And this is why it's so important to be the last one to speak. You know, that guy lipping off and all that. And this isn't the first time this has happened. You know, truck drivers tell a lot of BS stories. And as you get into this industry, you're going to hear a lot of them. The stories that I tell are all true. I try not to embellish any of them, and that's why I don't tell a whole lot of stories. And when you get in this business long enough, you're going to realize that most people are just full of crap. The one, you know, after I didn't engage the whole thing about trucking or about the military with the guy, but then he started talking about trucking, and that's kind of when I got into it. The guy claimed to have, you know, 20 plus years in the business, this, that, and the other thing, and you would think with 20 plus years he would have picked a few things up. So we got talking about the business. And now, mind you, I'm not going to degrade, I'm not going to denigrate, I'm not going to, you know, you go be you. You be the best you can be. That's why you're doing this. You want to make money, you want to be a success. I get it. But you also have to have a business plan. And when you run into people like this who just don't know, well, what was that old Richard Pryor line? His dad whipped him one day, and he said, boy, you don't even know what your own piss smells like. I run into that quite a bit. But is it your call? Should you call these people out? Most of the time, no. Most of the time, you should just let it go. Part of why it's so important to stay still and be quiet and not be emotional about all these and just let people talk, and because their own ignorance will betray them eventually. They'll be found out and they'll go off. The important thing is that you know what's right. It's not your job to call these people out, because a fight is not worth it. And a lot of these guys are willing to fight over their beliefs. And it's nice that some people are that passionate about what they believe. Did this guy believe what he was saying? I believe so. I think a lot of it was flexing. You're going to run into a lot of that. You know, he was sitting there building it up more than it should have been. And I run into this a lot. I make it my business to know as much about my business as I can. And in this business, you need to have several things. And one of them is you need to be able to be there's a certain amount of literacy you need. You need to be able to be competent in reading and writing. And for the most part, just basic the basic skills will get you by. You need a grasp of math. And the way we use math every day is that math is, it's not about getting the answer, it's about solving the problem. Math is a series of steps to solve a problem. It's problem solving. And if you understand the steps, you can solve problems. But the one thing you should never do is take anything anybody says personally. I've been guilty of it. I know all of you have too. We're human. We take things personally. But things a random guy says in a bar at 11 o'clock at night, you let those things go. They are not important. If there's anything of any value there, it will make itself known. But most of it just falls on the ash heap of ideas and gets blown away with the wind. Didn't mean to get poetic there. So the important thing is conducting yourself properly. And that's kind of what this video is about. You know, when you're dealing with people, and I've talked about this before in other videos, you cannot allow anything to be personal. If they give you a choice of loads, you have to figure out what's best for you, not what's best for the company. If you can find a nice balance, I mean, if they're giving you a choice, they've already decided any of these loads are going to be great for the company. So what's best for you? What's going to get you further down the road? You're here to run your business. Even as a company driver, you're here to make money. And arguing and being combative with people is going to get you put on the back burner. I know too many people that think everything's a conspiracy against them. They're holding back, they're this, they're that, they're the other thing. I tell you what, you get a peek behind that veil, it's nothing like you thought. I found me a flatbed tarp laying in the road today. It was in the road, just laying there right in the middle. I was at a stoplight. I just jumped out, grabbed it, threw it back up. Hopefully maybe there's something on here I can find the owner. So, well, we'll try. But so first of all, the dispatcher's dealing with you and 50 others just like you at any given time. They're juggling a lot of things. They're talking to customers. They're talking to shippers, receivers, setting appointments, doing the things they have to do. A lot of brokers and whatnot. So it's not personal. And it's nothing against, they don't have the time to really just search you out to intentionally screw you. Yeah, it's not a thing. I suppose in some smaller companies it is. I used to drive for a company out of Waterloo where that was a thing. But for the most part, no, it's not. A lot of these other companies, frankly, they just don't have the time. And when I got a peek behind the veil and I got to see how it was actually run, it was nothing like I thought. These were, especially at my last company, these were a bunch of overstressed, overworked people who hated their job yet had no other options but to stay where they were at. The last few years, that company really became a horrible place. The bell would ring at 5 o'clock, they'd clock out, and by 5:01, the parking lot would be vacant. They couldn't get out of there fast enough. They couldn't get to work, slow enough. It was yeah. We'll just stop that right there. But when I really started seeing what was going on, I remember thinking, wow, it's, these dispatchers, there were victims too. Victims of workplace violence. But so it's not anything really personal. You just can't make it personal. So as it happens, I didn't get the video done on the road. I'd been working nights quite a bit, and I did put it together when I got home, and I realized I hadn't quite finished it yet. So I didn't want the video to sound like I was rambling on about workplace and this and that and the other thing. The whole point of this video it's kind of what I started with. Sometimes you just got to know when to be quiet. You know, you never know who you're talking to in the truck stop half the time. You never know who's listening. You know, you might be standing next to the owner of the company, you know, in line. I remember Jim Palmer used to come down and eat at Meralt's in the morning. If you didn't know, he just looked like everybody else. You'd run into him in town. He was at the truck stop. He was just a regular, normal guy. Yet he owned the company I used to work for. And if you ever to see my boss now, the guy who I'm contracted to, he just looks like everybody else unless you know who he is. So, be very slow to speak, slow to anger, slow to, you know, cast judgment. Just, sometimes you don't know the story, and most of the time you don't. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, because this is a hard job. And why make it harder? Like I said, it was kind of weird being on the other side of it at the bar. You know, when the guy's sitting there talking about Army stuff, clearly not knowing who he was sitting there talking to. And so I got to thinking, you know, have there been times where I've sat there and said things next to a guy who, you know, and I've had guys try to BS me, like the mechanic with the Torino and all that. So, you just have to really mind your P's and Q's. It's vitally important that if you want harmony at your job and you want to go far, you really got to just watch who you talk to, how you talk to people, what you say. Because I'll tell you what, your general attitude towards the general public and your general attitude towards the people at your job, and the fact that you don't lip off and you don't, you know, those kind of things get noticed. And when you're yelling and screaming and basically being a jerk, those kind of things also get noticed. Emotion has no place in logic. You know, being emotional and yelling and going nuts, I'm sure that there are times when things just aren't going well and you gotta vent. Everybody does. It's just, but don't let that become your persona. You know, it's this job is, you know, I tell people this, and the people that don't do this think all we do is sit on our butt all day and drive truck. It's a very hard job. And when you really got to move, you really got to move, and it can get exponentially harder. So why are you making it any harder than it has to be? That's all I'm getting at, guys. This video is just, you know, I've talked about this kind of thing before about dealing with people. It's dealing with people is a very important part. And in this job, it's weird that, you know, being alone all day in a truck, you know, you wouldn't think you deal with as many people as we do, but you know what? We deal with people on the phone, we deal with customers, we deal with shippers, receivers, we deal with people in the truck stop, we deal with a lot of different people all day, every day. And how you deal with them is very important. So, that's all I was getting at, guys. Be safe out there, be profitable, and you know what? Watch your P's and Q's, because like I said, there are rats everywhere. And don't give the rats anything to chew on, man. So, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next video.